people are saying, we can take steps to check ourselves and have PSA tests and all of this. But down to that lived experience, dreadful expression, but he talked about his lived experience. I wouldn't know how to deal with those things. And I will look to inspiration from people like Chris Hoy. God forbid should I or any members of my family face such a thing.
It's an exclusive in the Sunday Times. It's a really heart-wrenching piece, but also a piece that's got hope and incredible courage. There's the news that Olympic cyclist Sir Chris Hoy, has told the Sunday Times that his cancer is now terminal. It's devastating news on top of his wife's diagnosis of aggressive MS. But Hoy says he's feeling optimistic, positive, and is still living his life as normal. Nick, we knew that Sir Chris Hoy was being treated for cancer at the beginning of the year, but this is just devastating news. But in a sense, in that powerful piece, he writes with such incredible hope and positivity.
It is extraordinary, and that positivity, I think, will really, it's something I'm sure he and his family will draw on. But actually, if you read that, or anyone else is in similar circumstances, you are frankly going to be inspired by that, I imagine. I was particularly taken because when he started writing about talking to the children and how he was going to, had explained things to the children, how they would explain to the children. So, there's two things I drew from that, is that we can go beyond the obvious comments, the, heartfelt comments about, public awareness of cancer and the need to, as people are saying in your report earlier, talked about it, how people are saying, we can take steps to check ourselves and have PSA tests and all of this. But down to that lived experience, dreadful expression, but he talked about his lived experience. I wouldn't know how to deal with those things. And I will look to inspiration from people like Chris Hoy. God forbid should I or any members of my family face such a thing.
Ava, what did you take from the piece? We were discussing it last night when it came out, but you can get access to these pieces early on. It came out at 10 o'clock on the website with your online Times subscription. And when we were reading it, we were talking about that we still are, or some of us, I don't want to include everybody, struggling sometimes with our relationship with death. And Sir Chris Hoy talks about, look, I'm fortunate enough to be given this time to settle my affairs, to say goodbye, to be under a time schedule where I get to do the things I want to do before I pass. Do you think that we need to talk more about our relationship with death?
Well, it's an incredibly humble and gracious piece. And there's actually a tweet that one of your colleagues, Tom Peck, has done, where he actually tweeted it last night, where he said he'd never forgotten Chris Hoy's words after he won his 6th Olympic gold medal at London 2012. And he said, I shut my eyes, I lunged, and I drove it all the way to the line. Then I heard this massive roar, and I hoped that it was for me. The sort of sheer modesty is what he's pointing out there. And that really comes across in the piece. And I think that, that's really wonderful for people to read. It's very uplifting. But also, if you're someone out there who has been devastated by a cancer diagnosis and you've reacted to it in a way that is nowhere near as golden as Chris Hoy has, that's perfectly okay. I don't think that there is one right way to react to a cancer diagnosis. And if you do spiral, and if your life has fallen apart for a couple of months and you manage to pick yourself back up afterwards, you're still just as much of a person as Chris Hoy is, and your reaction is just as valid.
Yeah. Well, look, to read that amazing interview with Sir Chris Hoy, you can go to thetimes.com and hit subscribe if you haven't already done so.
He makes clear in the really powerful article, when you've got the diagnosis, you have this spiral of fear and loss of control. So gaining control is really, really important. And now for him, everybody's different. For him, releasing some information so that people got used to it, and then more was right for him. As he says in the article so beautifully, he now wants people to treat him normally. He actually wants people to be normal with him, and that's his message giving it out. And that's perhaps how he managed to get where he is. And let's go with that for him. Great.
Yeah, and that's the thing. He does say clearly not every day is brilliant, but he feels that he has genuine moments of happiness. And perhaps those of us who aren't experienced in this sort of diagnosis would consider that or we would think wrongly that it's impossible to experience joy.
Oh, no. And he makes that very clear.
Yeah.
I thought his article was hard hitting, but it's full of hope. I think what cancer patients find, especially if you're well like he is at the moment and have got hopefully years, then it makes every day important. It realizes the now, and we all don't know what's going to happen, and we're all living our lives being stressed about all sorts of things. But this brings it what is really important and what is now, and that joy and the love and the hope that's there is actually touching people's life, which is so important.
Yeah, he does reflect also that's part of his hope and optimism comes from the spell of time that he has been given, I suppose, in his prognosis.
Yes, I think that's right. Obviously, for people out there who may have got a cancer diagnosis today or yesterday and they're not very well and they've got a very limited prognosis, that is a different type of mindset. But for him now, it's a case of he's had his first round of treatment, things seem to be better now, and he's just keeping his fingers crossed and will go again. And so he wants to live for now, and that's so important. He's got a young family and he wants to live his life.
Yeah. What about the young family then? His children are a focal point of the article as well, and it's always difficult to know how, when to tell children, how to deal with whatever response and reaction they may have as well.
Yes, and I think this is really important to touch on this. I think the main thing children want is you to be honest with them. Their fear is the unknown. So if you're honest with them, that's there. And I think it's age appropriate. As he mentioned, he told one of his very young sons he had a pain and he had some medicine, and the medicine was called chemotherapy. Sometimes children only need to know so much because they can't feel that going forward, but you must leave the doors open. They can talk openly and honestly at any time. It's all about people sharing and talking and allaying their fears. And just as an adult, if you're talking to somebody, just know sometimes you have to listen, leave your own fears at home, and how can you help that person, either listening or just being perhaps cheerful.
I think it's terribly sad. My first sort of reaction was him, referring to his two children, aged 10 and 7. He's only 48 years old, and just seems like such a, courageous and kind of admirable man, actually. And coupled with that, the news. I mean, it sounds as a tumor was found in his shoulder, and then a second scan found that the primary cancer in his prostate had metastasized. So it's not a good outlook at all. But also revealing that his wife has been diagnosed with a very aggressive and active type of multiple sclerosis. And I suppose with a young child myself, I'm just thinking about his two young children and how sad it is for him and his wife and for them. And yeah, I mean, you can be absolutely at the top of your game, and illness and cancer and death is a great leveler.
I mean, it is very difficult. I mean, I have personal experience of family who've been through this kind of thing, and you don't even want to talk to your family about it necessarily, because it's very difficult. It's very personal, especially if there are children involved. But good on him for being open about it. He's always been a very engaging public figure, and I think this will just increase his stature.
And being a role model as well, interestingly, I think, Emma, for living with stage 4 cancer. I mean, he says in the interview that actually he's booked a holiday for 2 weeks from today so that people don't come up to his kids in the playground, as you were alluding to earlier, and say, oh, I heard your dad's going to die. That's not how he wants this to be contextualized. At the moment, he's alive, and it's about seeing what he can achieve in that time.
Exactly. And it's so easy to sort of fall into these cliches, isn't it, about living every day like it's our last and all of that. But I do think that when you're given that kind of diagnosis, and when things do look pretty hopeless or terminal, after a period of grief and reflection and all of that, you probably do think, well, come on, let's just spend some money and enjoy what we have, enjoy the time, especially, again, with young children. I think that probably would make one really focus on just appreciating every moment, because what else can you do, And it's a lovely photo. He sort of looks very peaceful and smiling in a kind of sad way. It's a lovely photo on the front of the Sunday Times.